130 years, one question has refused to die. Was Lizzie Borden guilty? Or was she innocent? The evidence is tangled, motives overlap, clues contradict themselves, and the people at the center of it all, Lizzie, Bridget, Emma, John Morris, each hold pieces of a puzzle that may never fully fit. No confession, no modern forensic analysis, just whispers, rumors, and a story that has haunted American history for generations.
Today we weigh it all. The facts, the contradictions, the theories, the psychology, the social context, and the legacy. Not to declare the final answer, but to explore, dissect, and confront the question that obsessed historians and true crime fans alike. Was Lizzie Borden guilty, innocent, or somewhere in between?
I'm Jimbo.
And I'm Dustin. And this is Dark Discoveries.
Welcome back to Dark Discoveries, and welcome to the final episode of our 10-part exploration into the life, trial, legacy, and cultural shadow of Lizzie Borden. Now, before we dive in any further into this episode, I had the opportunity to watch a documentary on HBO Max, whatever you want to call it these days. It is called The Curse of Lizzie Borden, and it was basically narrated and hosted by Dave Schrader. Some of you may be familiar with some of his work. He's filled in on Coast to Coast AM several times. He's a great guy. I think he does Darkness Radio, if I remember right. He does a podcast or something too. But I found some little bit of nuggets of information I thought we better share with the audience so that way everybody can be on the same page. And if I found something that I thought we left out, I inputted it into this right here. So first, let's talk about the house. We have mentioned several times about, well, it's such a small house. How did nobody hear anything? So in this documentary, they show the house. It is basically 3 stories tall. So you have the main floor, which has like the parlor where the dad was hacked to death. You have like the kitchen and some other things. And then you go up to the second level through some stairs. And that's where all the bedrooms are. That's where Abby was found murdered. Lizzie's bedroom's there. I think even the husband had, or there was a guest room that Abby was cleaning. And I think even the dad had his own bedroom up there from what I could tell from that video. And then there is a 3rd floor. So if anybody has an older house, I know Dustin has an older house, like I would call it an attic, but it's not really an attic because you go up these stairs and that is the maid quarters, and it's got like the slanted roofs. I know a lot of the old Victorian style homes has those little rooms at the top that they would put their children in, or maybe even the maids or servants to help them. And I believe Dustin found some stuff on the barn.
Yeah, it's just crazy that they're going to consider this a small house, maybe for the time, because it's roughly about 4,000 square feet, 7 bedrooms. And it says 3.5 baths, but we know back then that, it wasn't really running water and all that stuff in those bathrooms and flushing toilets like we have today. So looking at kind of a street view of this house and going back in some old pictures, they call it a barn. And I guess it's going to be a barn because technically we're right at the turn of the century or before it. The automobile is very, very new in its infancy. And not everybody has one, but it's like a garage. It's maybe 10, 15 feet behind the house, it looks like. So when they tell you all this stuff, it kind of sounds a little misleading until you really dive in and take a look at the house and how things are set up, because you have that house and it looks like every bit of maybe 3 or 4 houses are on like that block. The neighbors, one neighbor is basically I don't know, a driveway and a half apart. So maybe 25, 30 feet at the most. The other one, there's a side yard. You're on top of a neighbor. And you were saying one of the neighbors was actually family, Jimbo?
Right. I have that right here. So the woman that you're referring to there, Dustin, was Eliza Darling Borden. She actually married into the Borden family. She was the second wife of Lodwick. How would you like that name? Lodwick Borden, who was a great uncle of Lizzie Borden. So, but who was she? Before she married this guy, she was a relative of the more famous Borden family of Fall River, the family that was connected to Lizzie Borden, but she was not directly part of Lizzie's immediate household. So what she did, it's terrible what she did, but in the 1840s, after giving birth to 3 young children in quick succession, Eliza fatally drowned 2 of her children in a cistern, or a well, if you will, in the family's home basement, and then she took her own life. Her oldest child, Maria, survived the incident, and historians speculate that Eliza may have suffered from severe postpartum depression or psychosis. Through the exact motive and details are lost in time. Also, if you go back even further, you remember, Dustin, you were talking about a crime that happened before this that was kind of like the trial of the century before this one. What it was a pastor that had basically gotten a lady pregnant, and he drug her to a tree basically and hanged her. And he was found not guilty on all the charges at the trial, just kind of like Lizzie was. So I thought that was important. That was all in this documentary, or The Curse of Lizzie Borden, where they focus more on the supernatural. They have a psychic medium there. They have a ghost investigator. They have Dave there, and then they have actually one of Lizzie Borden's like 5th removed cousins or something. So he's actually there, and he's a clairvoyant. So it's very interesting. Also, I found out that John Morris, we hadn't really touched on what he did, but he was a butcher, and he would carry around something, I don't know, kind of like an axe. Destin said it's a meat cleaver. I don't know exactly at that time what they were carrying around, but that just adds another speculation. And also that he was deep into like seances and all this. He didn't live very far away, but he lived in these woods. And the house, they went to the place where the house stood, and it's no longer there, but they have some experiences there too.
I have to correct myself already because Google didn't cooperate with me.
Oh no.
The murder house was between 12 and 1,500 square foot, which is a little on the smaller side of a house, but still a good size house. Her house that she bought.
Yeah.
Maplecroft was about 4,000 square feet.
So and I found this out while watching this too. Maplecroft was only about a mile away from this place. You know, when we
up on the hill.
When we say up on the hill, I'm thinking, it's up on like the cliffs, looking at the city or something. You know what I mean? But also another interesting fact that we found out, or I found out by watching this, was that they said the maid was actually not feeling well the day of the murders, and she went upstairs to lay down, which is very ironic considering every time you moved in that house, you could hear something. And where did the murders take place? Upstairs. But if she went to her quarters, that's the 3rd floor. How you didn't hear anything, I don't know. But let's continue on now. That was just some of the stuff I thought people might find interesting that we may have left out of earlier episodes.
Yeah, so in case you're listening and saying that, hey, these guys left a bunch of crap out. Well, we're not trying to.
Right. And who knows? Maybe we watch another documentary. Maybe we come back and add more to the Lizzie Borden saga. So, over these last 9 episodes, we've walked through every corner of this case, the eerily family tensions, the murders, the investigation, the trial, Lizzie's life after her acquittal, the conspiracy theories, and the supernatural myths that still linger today. Now we come to the question that has haunted historians, criminologists, and true crime fans for over 130 years, and Dustin over these last 10 episodes. Was Lizzie Borden guilty? It's a simple question with a complicated answer, because this case doesn't behave like a typical murder investigation. The evidence contradicts itself, the motives overlap, behavioral clues can be interpreted in opposite ways. Forensic science didn't exist in any meaningful capacity back then. The trial was shaped by Victorian norms that do not apply today. And the people involved, Lizzie, Bridget, Emma, John Morse, all present mysteries of their own. Today, we're weighing everything: the facts, the contradictions, the theories, the psychology. And you know what? We're going to even touch on Lizzie's legacy today because we're not going to deliver an absolute verdict against her because that would be wrong of us to do. But we are going to examine everything that we have talked about and see if we can't come to a logical conclusion. Because you know what? The truth may just be unknowable. But to offer our final analysis of the most infamous unsolved murder case in American history.
And there's one thing we've learned throughout this series is that Lizzie Borden, this case gets under your skin because it's riddled and refuses to give you a straight answer. Every theory makes sense until it doesn't. The deeper you dive, the muddier it gets. Every motive feels convincing until you compare it with another. The evidence both is too much and not enough at the same time. You can build a compelling argument for Lizzie's guilt and then an equally compelling argument for her innocence. And neither argument feels entirely complete. That's why this case still thrives, because uncertainty is the engine of fascination. Today, we're pulling everything together, not to solve the case in a definitive way, but to confront the complexity of it head on. If you've come this far with us, you've already know the truth in this story isn't simple, and it isn't clean. It's messy, it's human, it's contradictory, and it's a timeless mystery. So let's dive into the final verdict of history, not necessarily the courtroom verdict, but kind of a deeper one.
So, Dustin, we're going to look at the case for Lizzie's guilt. This is what we've came across that we think this is why Lizzie is guilty. So let's begin with the argument that has dominated cultural imagination for more than a century. The belief that Lizzie Borden murdered her father and stepmother. On the surface, the case against her seems really, really strong. I ain't going to lie. She was only one of only two people home during the window of both murders. Let's face it, she had motive, which was what? Financial gain. She had hatred towards Abby. She was frustrated with Andrew's control. Her behavior after the murders was unusual, to say the least. It was calm, composed, and contradictory. She gave inconsistent statements about her whereabouts. She lied about Abby receiving a note, a claim no messenger has ever came forth and confirmed. She burned a dress days after the murders. And she was the last known person to see Andrew alive before he was brutally killed. The timeline fits her better than anyone else we have ever talked about. Her social isolation and the locked nature of the home make the idea of an outside killer improbable. And the murders themselves, quiet, focused, with repeated blows, suggest emotional intensity. During that show that I watched on HBO Max, it said that Abby's was like fueled by hatred because her like entire face, they have photos during this, and you can find the photos online, but it was hit so hard, like her skull was fractured in multiple spots. She was barely recognizable. But many criminologists argue that the type of overkill inflicted on Abby is consistent with personal resentment, not random violence.
And when you lay it all out, it's like that. The guilt argument really does feel overwhelming. The dress burning alone is enough to make you almost suspect her. Add in the fact that she has supposedly heard nothing during either murder, even though the attacks were violent and occurred in a very close proximity. The suspicion only grows. Her shifting story about being in the barn, which, like I said, the barn is not that far from the house, like, 10, 20 feet looks like from the back door. Like I said, it's a week from the beginning. Officers found no footprints in the dust. The heat inside the barn would make it lingering inside uncomfortable. Her demeanor bothered the investigators. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't exhibiting any signs of grief. The lack of defensive wounds on both Andrew and Abby suggests that they trusted whoever the person was that attacked them. Or at least they didn't perceive danger until it was too late. Something that fits a family member more easily than a stranger. From a basic probability standpoint, Lizzie had the most motive, the most opportunities, and the most suspicious behavior. If the case happened today, modern juries armed with the psychological frameworks may be a little bit less inclined to acquit.
Right. So that was the case for Lizzie's guilt. Now let's talk about the facts about the case against Lizzie's guilt, like not guilty. So here we go. So let's flip the coin, because the argument for her innocence is just as compelling in many ways. First and foremost, and one thing I always keep coming back to, there was no physical evidence tying Lizzie to the murders. No blood on her clothing, no weapon conclusively identified, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses. So even today, most murders leave some sort of trace evidence, but you got to remember this is back then. They didn't have a lot of the technology we have today. And the idea that Lizzie committed 2 axe murders without leaving a single drop of blood on herself, it's just hard to accept. There was also no clear immediate trigger that morning. Nothing to suggest why she would launch into a sudden murderous rampage. The timeline is tight, maybe a little too tight. She would have needed to kill Abby, clean herself, remain calm around Bridget, wait for Andrew, kill him, clean up again, dispose of evidence, and act composed. This is theoretically possible, but let's face it, that's going to be extremely, extremely difficult to do. Bridget, who was in and out of the house, saw no signs of cleanup, and Lizzie herself had no known history of violence or emotional instability. Combine all of that with incompetent police investigation, and the case for reasonable doubt becomes very, very strong.
And we take this a little bit further. Modern criminologists often argue that murders require physical strength. Not impossible for a woman, but very difficult for a woman in Victorian clothing. So you got to think you've probably got a girdle on that's probably, it's keeping your posture. It's going to probably make it a little tougher to move around, be a little bit more cumbersome on you. Maybe she just kind of didn't put it on that day. So that's an idea there. The changing dresses repeatedly without anybody noticing, also questionable. And then there's the behavior after the murders. Some see Lizzie's calmness as suspicion. Others see it as shock, disassociation, or simply a personality type that doesn't express emotion outwardly. Trauma manifests differently in everyone. The inconsistencies in her statement could be due to stress, medication, or confusion. And the lack of blood evidence remains the biggest sticking point. Forensic experts today say that it's almost impossible to avoid spatter in such a close contact attacks. The prosecution case rests heavily on the assumption rather than proof. And finally, the jury's swift acquittal wasn't simply Victorian sexism. Many jurors said that afterwards they were unconvinced by the prosecution's timelines and saw too many holes in the evidence. So the innocence argument is not only plausible, it's actually supported by legal and forensic standards that would apply in any era. And that is a good argument. Our argument on it is you're in close contact. I don't see how you would not have blood spatter on something else.
Well, I mean, in your hair, just think about it.
Especially with the brutality. Yeah. Your back of your head is there on the ground. And a lot of it, they said, puddled up underneath on the carpet and on the ground or the floor, whatever. It may not have been carpet, but you would think you're going to have some splatter outward.
Right.
You're going to have some that's going to end up on the wall, on the sofa, on something beside. There wasn't much time to clean up.
No.
And I'm going to say with the what was available back then to clean the blood, you would probably notice a stain that probably bleached it.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a look at the psychological puzzle. What kind of person was Lizzie really like? Could she have had a split personality disorder where maybe she is telling the truth, maybe she doesn't remember doing it, right? It could have been
that multiple personality.
Right. So to understand whether Lizzie could have done this, we need to examine her psychology. By all accounts,
Lizzie didn't do it. Elizabeth did.
That's what I'm saying. Lizzie was intelligent, creative, proud, and sensitive to social perception. She lived under the strict financial and emotional control of her father, who kept the family in an outdated house despite their wealth. She resented Abby, but whether that resentment was mild irritation or deep hatred is still unclear. Some portray Lizzie as a woman trapped in a stifling home, growing increasingly desperate for freedom. Others see her as cold, calculating, and emotionally repressed. The psychological profile is ambiguous. On one hand, people with repressed emotions can snap at any given moment, especially under extreme stress. On the other hand, people with no history of violence rarely commit two brutal murders spontaneously. Lizzie's personality doesn't fit neatly into either box. She was neither a stereotypical psychopath nor a perfect saint. She existed somewhere in the gray zone where motives and emotions become murky.
And that's what makes her such a fascinating psychological puzzle. Psychologists today debate whether Lizzie fits the profile of a family enabler. I don't know what that word is, so it's okay. A reactive killer or an innocent bystander.
Annihilator?
Annihilator. I don't know why I was not wanting to pronounce that one. It's been a long day, long week already. So, some believe that she acted in a moment of rage, perhaps triggering by something Abby said or that something that happened that morning. Others believe the murders were premeditated, a plan born from resentment or financial fear. And still others argue she never showed the behavioral markers typically of somebody who could carry out such violence. She wasn't impulsive, she wasn't violent, and she wasn't confrontational. Her later life, though isolated, didn't unravel into chaos or escalation, something that's going to be common among guilty individuals who commit emotionally motivated crimes. Look at O.J. Simpson. I know we kind of mentioned that. If you look at his life up to the murders, after the murders, you see a lot of still anger and violence that happens with him after the murder. So it's one of those you'd expect if she did do it, if she's that kind of person, that you would expect to see more things in life with her. But for the most part, it just seems like she kind of conformed and went along with life. Maybe the issue with her sister was maybe a physical altercation. So if she is kind of bipolar or has some type of split personality, maybe she's able to control it to a point and something set her off. And then maybe she went so far that it scared her sister off. And
but not only that, but if she did do it or didn't do it, I think the lack of emotion, that says something too, because she was just calm. If somebody comes to your house, Dustin, and brutally murders your wife and child, are you just going to be like, oh, calm? Oh, well, yeah. No, you're going to be hysterical.
You're going to be, I would think so. I'm kind of a cold person at times. I'm not going to say I'm always cold, but I can put a lot of emotions back. But when you get something like this, that's beyond normal emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't see it being, unless you're a really crazy, psychopath, you're going to just stay cool, calm, and collective and kind of just, laugh under your breath and not show anything.
Right. So let's go ahead and talk about the likely scenarios, what really happened. I mean, we've talked about these theories before, but we're not going to look at them as conspiracies this time, but as logical scenarios of what really could have happened. So scenario 1, that Lizzie acted alone. This is the simplest and most widely accepted. She killed Abby, waited an hour, then killed Andrew. She cleaned up carefully and concealed the weapon. This scenario fits motive and opportunity, but struggles when confronted with the lack of physical evidence.
I still feel like that's the least.
I still don't think I agree with that.
I don't think that she acted alone. No. If there was more to it, I feel like the uncle was involved somewhat. There was just, when you look at all the stuff going on, it's just too much coincidence.
Well, let's go ahead and drive into scenario number 2 then. Lizzie acted with an accomplice. This solves many logical or logistical problems, particularly the timing, but it lacks evidence as well. Possible accomplices include Bridget, Emma, or even Morse, but no testimony supports active collaboration. And you know what? Something we haven't even talked about, Dustin?
What's that?
It could have been more than 2 people. It could have been the uncle, Lizzie, and Emma, and Bridget. It could have been all 4 of them working together, or all 3 of them, however you want to look at it.
2 people, I think, work together, at least. And to pull this off, I think everybody has to be on the same page.
Scenario number 3 again. How about an outside killer? Highly improbable due to the layout of the home and lack of signs of intrusion, but you never know. Remember, Andrew was a shrewd businessman at times. Maybe he did something to make some people mad.
Could definitely make some enemies.
Right. Scenario number 4. Abby was the primary target. Andrew's murder was just secondary. This flips the motive. Perhaps Lizzie or someone else wanted Abby dead, and Andrew's death was a cover-up. So, I don't know if I buy into that one either.
The first one definitely was... I could possibly see it like...
I think she was targeted.
She was definitely targeted because you see that the amount of rage in it where it was absolutely brutal. It was up close. It was meant to send a message.
I still go back to Andrew stepped away. Was he coming back home at a time he wasn't supposed to be there? So they didn't get completely done with what they wanted to get done. And he was just a casual... oops, bystander, wrong place, wrong time.
I can see that because if you think he's going to be out longer than he was,
right,
you have time to murder her and to get rid of the body.
I mean,
if he comes home right away, oh shit, she's dead. What are we going to do?
Right.
And it's one of those things that it escalates because it has to.
And scenario number 5, how about a spontaneous act of rage? Psychologically plausible, especially if triggered by a household conflict that morning, but doesn't explain how she remained composed afterwards so well.
So of the scenarios, the one that makes the most sense logically is that Lizzie killed Abby in a moment of rage or confrontation, panicked, and then killed Andrew later out of necessity. It explains the emotional brutality of Abby's killings, 19 blows, and the more controlled nature of Andrew's. It explains Lizzie's odd behavior, her inconsistent statements, and her attempts to cover it up. But it still doesn't explain how she avoided getting blood on herself or how she managed to act calmly with Bridget nearby. The 2-killer theory, while speculative, actually fits the physical constraints better, but again, it lacks historical support and evidence. The truth falls likely in between the 2 realities. The case points towards Lizzie, but not definitely. The evidence also suggests involvement, but not conclusively. The mystery remains because every plausible scenario has a flaw. And let's think. So the 2-person theory, we're talking about lack of blood. We know that she burned a dress. My guess is there was some type of, blood spatter on it, so she gets rid of it. But who disappears for a while and shows back up? Enough time to maybe change clothes, clean himself up, make it look like, everything was okay, and I just happened to come back.
Who's that?
John Morse, the uncle.
But remember, he had like the airtight alibi. It was almost too perfect, they say, right? That's like, I'm going to go get these receipts while you kill her, and I'll come back and help clean it up because we have to have an alibi.
Or maybe it happened. Maybe she was drugged or something happened before Andrew even left.
Could be. But here we are. This is the moment we all been trying to reach for this entire series. The question that we want to know about this verdict of history. So based on everything Dustin and I have talked about, we've covered the evidence, the lack of evidence, the context, the psychology, and the contradictions. What can I say? Not as jurors, not as prosecutors, just 2 idiots that have a podcast. But as we took a dive into this, I kind of consider ourselves like a historian, right? An analyst. Yeah, we want to seek the truth.
Right enough, Right.
So the verdict of history seems...
Give us a platform. We're going to be an expert. I don't care what we do. We can say we're experts and nobody can't stop us. They can dispute it, but they can't stop us.
So the verdict in history seems to be this. Lizzie Borden is neither fully guilty nor fully innocent. She exists.
Well, you can't have your glass half full and half empty. You got to be one side or the other. You're still, even if you participated, you're still guilty.
So she exists in that space where suspicion outweighs exoneration, but proof falls short of a conviction. If she committed the murders, she did so in a rare window of opportunity with extraordinary composure and efficiency. If she didn't commit the murders, then the killer vanished without a trace, leaving behind no evidence and escaping one of the most scrutinized crime scenes in history. The truth is elusive because the case itself is flawed. Too much was mishandled. Too much was assumed. Too much was lost. Lizzie remains suspended between guilt and innocent. And let's face it, if the police would have done their job, we may not have even been talking about this because it probably would have been solved. So, Dustin, I'm going to go ahead right here, and I'm going to say what I believe happened. Then after you get done with your part, you can say what you believe happened. Here's what I believed happened. I believe their uncle, I believe John and Abby got up early. Andrew and Abby got up early. I believe John had came down the day before. They talked about inheritance. I think there was something about a farm. And John's like, oh, I got to go. I got to go down to catch my train, whatever bus, horse and carriage, whatever he was taking. And backs up. I think Lizzie comes down and they have breakfast, right? Lizzie and Bridget and Abby. And then Abby's like, well, guess what? I need to go upstairs and clean the guest room. I need to make the bed and everything, which I find strange because you have a maid, right? Why was she going to do this when she had a maid? So I think this is the point where Abby, and I'm going to say Bridget, this is my theory. I think Abby and Bridget work together because a maid is going to know how to clean up quick. She's used, and here's something else that I just thought about. Remember what I said about the lady that married into the family next door? What was it, Eliza, I think? What did she do to her kids? She drowned them in the cistern or the well in their basement. Did this house have a basement? I think it did because I think that's where they found the axe handle with no blade.
And supposedly the only running water
there
or
you
toilet
go.
In the basement.
So they could have done that, went down there. She could have stowed her dress down there, right? The one with blood. And Abby Bridget could have been up there helping to scrub the evidence or even help Lizzie, bathe, get it off your face, get it off your hands. Oh, you got some on your clothes, on your shoes. Let's get rid of it. We need to hide these because your dad's going to be coming home sometime. We don't know when. And I think while they were doing that, they probably had Abby go, hey, wait, we'll go outside and clean the windows, so we have an alibi. I'll go out there and eat a couple of pears out here and, run around in the barn. So at least I know I have this going on. And that's going to be part of our alibi. And then the point where I think she messed up, if she did it, is when she told everybody that she had stepped away because there was a letter that came and she wasn't there. I think that's the part where Lizzie or whoever, I think that's
all the great planning was foiled by
a letter,
the wrong statement.
Right. And I think that's the reason why her suspicion looks as bad as it did. And number two, let's face it. Your dad comes home. I think he came home early. Abby probably came down the stairs and was like, and I can see Bridget looking from the kitchen like, oh no, what are we going to tell him? She's still upstairs dead. We haven't had time to get rid of the body, because I think it could have went further like, oh, but we're going to kill her and then we're going to move her body or chop it up and get rid of it. So that way she left this note saying, oh, she left. Well, now they got to find her body parts wherever they're going to do that.
And depending on the time of year, when the sun sets, it starts to get dark. You maybe thought, well, when he comes home, it'll be starting to get dark. We can start moving her outside and just make it look like she left.
Right. So I think her dad came home. They got that look of, oh, great. What's going to happen? He said, oh, you know what? I got up a little early this morning with your stepmom. I'm going to go take a little lay down here on this couch here in the parlor. And I think that's when they're like, well, he's going to know. He's going to know too much. And I think that's when they did it again. Again, you got Bridget there to help clean up. I don't think John Morse was involved personally. I think it was Bridget and I think it was Lizzie. And now that's my own opinion. And I think that's why they got together and, did they witness something where maybe Andrew had sexually molested Lizzie or beat her or anything like that? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that, but that could be why they were so close together. And who knows? Maybe Lizzie killed Abby because it was a hatred, some more, and maybe Bridget killed the dad because maybe Lizzie was upstairs still dealing with that, and Bridget, killed the dad. She's like, "Oh, great, what are we gonna do?" So now we're in this together. The only downfall for this I see is that I think Bridget kind of turns on her in the her testimony, right? Like where she's saying she's wearing different clothing and everything. That's the only flaw I see. There's that and the note. That's what I think happened. And I still don't understand how the cops did not search that house up and down and let people just come in there, take pictures, whatever they wanted to do, because I think this was a solvable crime and it just got too far out of control too fast. And that's what you got. You got the verdict you got, not guilty. It doesn't mean she's innocent. It just means she's not guilty. And that's where I think this lies in history. So, Dustin?
I think you're on the right path of what you're talking about. I think that John Morse was involved. You talk about the inheritance and the farm and everything, the land stuff. And he was supposed to catch a train, but yet he showed back up. There's no cell phones. There's no radio. There may be some radio, but you're not going to hear, "Oh, he was murdered. I better get back home." You should have been gone out of town when they found him. So maybe the plan was that and it just didn't get executed. Maybe somebody seen him not at the train station. So it's like, all right, I was going, but I had to come back. I think you're on the right path. And when you're talking about Andrew's character, about what he may or may not have done within the four walls of his house, if he was a monster, it wasn't uncommon to take out some of that frustration with a maid. And it wasn't really talked about. It happened a lot. And maybe the culmination of it, maybe she seen just how sadistic he was on how he treated people. And maybe she said, I have enough too. Let's do it. I think there's more people at play than meets the eye. But I think you're on the right path. That's the way I'm thinking. But I think that John was probably involved. What's the odds?
Well, here's something else I just thought about too. Lizzie's maternal mom died when she was really young.
I think.
Yeah. So I kind of wonder how long Bridget the maid was with him. Maybe she looked up to her like a mother that helped raise her instead of the stepmom. That could be. It could have been like her maternal figure. That's who she, hey, by the way, come on, Lizzie, you got to go to school. Come on, Lizzie, we got to get dressed. Come on, Lizzie, we're going to church. Maybe she was the one that was in charge of all that, and Lizzie actually cared for her. So
yeah, back to like the Murdaugh murders. When you go and watch that, and I'm going to cover that eventually. I think there's just too much right now too much publicity that's getting right now to really tell a good story with it. It's a fantastic, it's really a lot of layers in that. And the son that ended up getting killed by his dad to cover all this up, who died before him? The maid, like his caretaker. Like he wasn't overly close to his mom and dad. He was raised by a nanny. So that nanny is mom. She takes you to school. She gets you ready. She does all this stuff and takes place of a parent. And when you're there like that, that motherly instinct's going to kick in. She's going to take care of her child. Doesn't matter if it's her biological child or not. She raised her. She's taken care of her. You begin to have feelings and emotions for this child as your own. And when you see everything going on, you're going to protect your kid.
But that only works if the maid was with them for a long period, like 30 years, because if she was just there for like 2 years, that kind of goes out the window. But I'm not saying he still didn't abuse her even when she was 32 when this all happened.
Yeah, there's a lot that we don't know, and given the time and all this, even if she wanted to come public, if there was something, nobody's going to believe her. They're going to just kind of cast it away. And, you at that point, I think she just wanted to move on and get on with her life, which brings up to me, we're talking guilty or innocent. She was found innocent.
No, she was found not guilty.
Well, not guilty.
Innocent.
So to say that, you're half guilty, like you were kind of alluding to almost like half guilty.
It's kind of like you're guilty, but we don't have enough evidence to prove that you're guilty, so we're just gonna say you're not, we don't think you're innocent, that you didn't do anything. We're just saying you're not guilty because there's not enough proof or evidence to say you're guilty.
And I think what happens is, I think Lizzie ultimately paid a pretty big sacrifice on this, because at the beginning, she has her sister, she has this big house that she thinks her life will be different and that everything's going to be better. And then the town turns on her. Yeah, she traveled, and when she was away, she got that freedom. But it seemed as she aged, she stayed at home more. And then she became a prisoner in her own home. She didn't want to go out because the town was talking about her. Her sister left. She's in this whole big house by herself.
Yeah, but you got to remember, that's when she started throwing parties and hanging out with actors and actresses and musicians and all that at her house.
Now, that was before things really started to take that turn. That's up to the point that her sister was there. I'm sure a little bit happened after her sister left, but it seems like things started to change after she left. Yeah, there's probably a few more years of good times, but it seemed like ultimately towards the end, it started to be, a prisoner in your own home.
Well, let's think, how cruel can kids be? They in that The Curse of Lizzie Borden, they showed her Maplecroft home too. It's beautiful, but they said, she would be here and kids would come knock on the door, run away. They would throw rocks at her window and all that. I mean, guilty in the public opinion, I guess, or Dustin, you ever been like, when you were younger, maybe, or even now, you're like, don't go up and knock on that house. Crazy old Johnson lives there or whatever. You know what I mean? They always put there's always that one house that's kind of weird. The weird guy lives there. The weird lady who lives there. Kids can be cool.
We had more than one in our neighborhood, it felt like.
One was your house. Is that what you're saying?
No, there was one, because we lived basically, the neighborhood was like an 8 shape. And there was certain areas that you would, and the guy wasn't probably bad. He was an older guy. My mom lived in that neighborhood, so it's all people that she knew. So you'd go hang out with people that your mom knew that were, you're 8, 9, 10 years old. They're 40 or 50. You know what I mean?
Right.
You knew everybody. They all kept an eye, but there was certain areas. There was 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 points around that 8-shaped neighborhood. You would pedal your bike as fast as you could to get past it.
So
it's just how it was.
Let's face it. The answer is not clear, and maybe it never will be. Lizzie Borden is a reminder that not every crime has a solution. Not every solution has a closure. And with that, we are going to conclude our 10-part journey into the life, trial, legend, and legacy of Lizzie Borden. A story that refuses to die, a mystery that refuses to resolve, a woman who refuses to be defined by one narrative. If there's one thing I wish we could find out, Dustin, before we die sometime in our life, there's some things that you want to know. Basically, who shot JFK? You want to know who killed John Benet Ramsey. You
want that mermaids are fake, so Jimbo can rest.
And you want to know, this is one of those ones that's like, man, you want to know the answer so bad, and they could have had it. They just screwed up. So whether you guys see her as a victim, a villain, or something in between, where I end up partaking, I don't know. I don't want to say she's a really evil person. I just think her situation and her circumstances forced her to do what she did. And I think she paid for it for the rest of her life for what happened. But it remains one of the most haunting stories in American history.
Absolutely. So thank you for sticking with us through this deep dive. And remember, the best mysteries aren't the ones with answers. They're the ones that force us to ask better questions. Lizzie Borden will always be.
Oh, yeah, she's going to be one of those mysteries. But Dustin, we hope people have enjoyed this 10-part series. And if you did, can you send us an email? Because we might do some more of these at darkdiscoveriespod@gmail.com, because
Yeah.
we have fun doing these. It's a deeper dive. When Jackie's not here, she doesn't really like the deeper dives, but Dustin and I
not really big into serial killers and different things like that. So
thrive on this. I think one of our funnest episodes or series we ever did was Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes. This one's getting up there because I've really enjoyed looking into this case. We have some other ones that we're going to be doing as we go along, but we just want to know if you, the listener, like these, if you can email us or message us on Facebook or even tell us in person. We're going to continue to do these. So sorry, Dustin, I want to make sure we got that in there.
I don't know if it's going to be a 2 or 3 part or if I'm going to go ham on it. The Atlanta child murders is one that got me into podcast. It got me into true crime, like more than just the gangsters and the outlaws that were fun. It's one that really, I don't know what it was. I think the storytelling of the podcast Atlanta Monster was just, it drew you in, and it really sucked you into the story and wanting to know. And the more that I've done research and I've listened to different things, it sounds like there's more underneath the surface, and I have my own theories on some things. So not sure how it's going to go out, but that's the next big project I'm working on.
Well, and let's go ahead and throw out a couple other podcasts that we both have told each other about. One is Bone Valley. If you guys have not listened to Bone Valley, it is, man, it's wild. It's wild.
It's a good one, and it's one that you really need to listen to a few episodes before.
Yeah, because Dustin didn't really like it when I first told him. I was like, man, I don't know if I can do this. But once you hit that point, you're like, oh man, is this guy ever going to get out of prison because he did not do this? You know what I mean?
We're gonna have to probably share some weekly because there's just too many to go. But Atlanta Monster was a fantastic one. And I know a lot of people aren't really big into Payne Lindsay, but another one that really got me into true crime that had me hook, line, and sinker was Up and Vanished. The first season of Up and Vanished really drew me into podcast. And we went to Disney in 2018 or 2019 before the ID happened. And I'm listening to it driving through Georgia and driving south. And you start seeing the signs for like Osceola and Fitzgerald and all this stuff. And you start seeing some pecan orchards popping up along the interstate as you're listening, and it's talking about it. And it just kind of, for me, history is the most fascinating thing is to step where these people stepped, to go see the things, to walk the paths that they walked. And then you can kind of put a footprint of your own in history, and you kind of realize the world isn't as big as you think it is.
And you can visualize what actually happened.
Yep. And then it's a lot smaller.
And then one more, and then we'll have Dustin wrap this up. But was it called In the Red Clay, Dustin?
In the Red Clay, another fantastic
one.
Save that.
That's one that Dustin said, hey, you got to listen to this. And we won't spoil it because we might do something with that. Not as good as they did because they were fantastic in that whole product. But that story still needs to be told because that's a fantastic story too.
Well, when you're dealing with the guy's son that's telling the story, it doesn't get much better than that. It's basically from the horse's mouth. If you guys have any questions on those, feel free to shoot me an email. I love, like, some people's like, oh, okay, I've got 1 or 2 podcasts I listen to, and then it's music. I probably have about 30 to 40 podcasts that I rotate through, different ones, different topics all over the board. I will go back and listen to certain ones again for just, because it's some research to kind of get your mind sharp back on what you're doing. But by all means, shoot me an email. Give me some suggestions. If you've listened to them, let me know. I'll give you guys suggestions because it's something I really enjoy.
All right, one more and then we're done, I promise.
If you get one, I get one.
Well, no, this is going to cover for both of us. The one podcast that I have listened to probably all 850 episodes or whatever now is True Crime Garage. If you are a true crime fan, go give Nick and the Captain a listen. I know Dustin is starting to come around on him. He didn't necessarily like him at the beginning, but now that they got their own groove you got to get used to. I listen to those as I drive 2 hours to work and 2 hours home every Friday. So I love them. I think they are top notch in the true crime podcast world. So give those a listen to.
And I'm going to give you one more just because it's right up our alley. And I think Jimbo needs to listen to it when he has those car rides. There's another one called Gangster House. And it is kind of like, I don't know. I'm not even going to give it away. Just look up Gangster House. It's another really good one. And then maybe next week we'll give you, well, another episode will give you some other ones to listen to. But I'm a junkie. Like I said, give us feedback. We take everything that we listen to when you're trying to really form your own style into this. You listen to different people in different ways, and I'm no way, shape, or form as polished as anybody that I listen to, but it's a lot of fun. Like I said, there's so many different deep dives that we're going to have to get into. And like I said, Jackie's not big on, like the Atlanta child murders won't be up her alley. It's not something she's into. She's not into serial killers. I like some serial killer stuff, but I don't want to do the same thing everybody's already done a bajillion times. We're going to cover a few of the big ones.
And we'll put our own spin on it as well.
Yeah. You got to put your spin, but I like to find the ones that are maybe a little bit more local, or maybe ones that aren't told as much, because the victims, whether they're prostitutes, whether they're children, whether they're just normal people who just fit a mold, their story needs to be told. And we're not glorifying, like we say in the disclaimer on the older episodes, we're not glorifying the criminals. We're shedding light on what happened on a tragedy. We're laughing at some of the misfortune, the stupidity that the criminals do. We're poking fun at the police when they maybe mess some stuff up because it makes it tougher. But there's a lot of really good stuff that you'll learn. Like I was listening to some stuff about the Green River Killer, and they brought in Ted Bundy to help give them an idea of what to look for. And I think he gave them too much information, because I think he was kind of vicariously living through them and giving out what he would have done, which I think gives them more information. If they would have went to him first, it probably would have helped.
All right, Dustin, let's start wrapping Lizzie up, or this is going to be a deep dive on different podcast episodes.
That's a lot into something else for another day. But, Lizzie Borden's always going to be one of those mysteries that you just never know. I hope this series gave you not just information, but some insight into it. Not the facts, but the emotional and the human complexity behind it. One of the things that fascinates me more than anything is the psychology. What makes people do what they do? What makes them feel a certain way and think, and different things in life lead them there. And I don't know if we know all the answers of what maybe led Lizzie there. So, like we said, this has been Dark Discoveries, and this was our version of the story of Lizzie Borden. So, as always, remember, the deeper you dive,
the darker it gets. You sure you don't want to add another 10 podcasts on here, Dustin?